John Wilson, welcome to Acquiring Minds.
Thanks for having me on. This is a long time coming.
Well, I was just going to say, back in 2021, John, when I first got into this world, you were one of the very first names that I learned in the SMB Twitter sphere. So you were a big deal then. 2.5 years later, you're a bigger deal still. So I am thrilled to finally get you in the seat.
Yeah, no, this is fun. I think I sort of disappeared off Twitter, and I'm sure we'll break into why. And, teaser, it's because acquiring 3 companies and quadrupling in 5.5 months while talking about it publicly on Twitter is exhausting. So one of those things has to give. So it was my Twitter presence.
Well, so I guess things are slow at the Wilson companies because you've come back hard in the last 6 months?
Yeah. Not slow. We got over the hump.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
but I'm sure
we're
we'll
going to hear
in.
about this hump.
I'm sure we're going to hear all about it.
Well, a lot of people listening will at least know you by name, if not your story. But we're gonna do your story in full. You own Wilson Companies, a home services business, and we're going to spend a lot of our conversation on that tonight. But you're also something of a media entrepreneur with a podcast of your own called Owned and Operated, a successful podcast, and a conference, Holdco Conf, which my audience will have heard of. Your partner in that, Kelsey Larrick, has been on the pod a couple times. So if we have time, we'll get to those ventures as well. But let's turn our attention to the main event, Wilson Companies, John. So just to set the stage, give us a sense of when you became owner, fair way to put it?
Yeah.
When you became owner, how big was Wilson Companies in revenue and employees today in January, last day of January 2024? How big is it, revenue and employees?
Yeah. So like quick hits, when I took over in 2016, we were doing about $1 million in revenue with about 8 team members. Fast forward today, we're 7 years and 3 or 4 months in, and I have about 142 employees on the team, and our budget is $26 million for this year.
Incredible.
The sort of I said this in our company Slack earlier today. So today was a big day. It's kind of funny that we're talking today because it's a big day for a few reasons. One, we set an all-time record for any month ever. So January 2024. I'm excited to break it again, but this was a record month for us.
Congrats.
And it was also when you run a business long enough, you hit milestones, right? You hit milestones along the way. And one of my big milestones was my first full year of ownership, which was 2017. And in 2017, we had maybe 12 or 13 team members, and I did $1.7 million, which felt like such a big number to me. And today, in January of 2024, we did more in revenue this month than I did in that entire year of my first year of ownership. So that's I'm feeling very nostalgic about a lot of things today because that was such a, anytime we've had these like, holy smokes, I just did more revenue in a week than I used to do in a month, or nowadays it's more revenue in a day than we used to do in a month, which is like just blowing my mind. But today was especially fun because it was a record month. We did more in a month than we did in the entire year of 2017. And I'm about to make my final payment for the deal that changed my life in 2018. So like my final payment is due tomorrow, and the seller's going to walk through the business and see what's happened in the 6 years since I bought his company. So a fun day, a fun day
awesome.
For all of us here. Wilson.
Awesome. What timing. Lucky us.
Yeah,
well,
it was
congratulations,
good. It was good
John.
timing.
That's really cool on both fronts, on the revenue record setting for the month and on your final payment tomorrow for the deal that changed your life.
Yeah.
Which we'll have to hear about that one.
Yeah, we're here to talk about it.
Well, we're not going to be able to condense 7 years into this time, especially also because I want to hear you riff on a lot of topics that are not directly your story. So we're going to try to do your story as much of it as we can in kind of the first half, and then leave the second half for topics, themes, thoughts.
Yeah.
So let's do your story though. So 2017, your first full year of ownership. Take us back there. How did you get in? What does that mean? How did you get into this business? Give us a story.
Yeah. So I own my family's third generation plumbing and HVAC company. My grandfather, Ralph, started it in 1958. That's incorporation date. He had actually run it a few years prior. He came back from the war and he was, looking for some stuff to do. Did it for about a decade, made it a company. And it started off in my grandparents' house. I think there's a picture of my grandmother picking up the phone at their kitchen table, and that was the plumbing company. And it ran really pretty small, and it feels strange to abbreviate such a long period of time. But the company ran from 1958 to 1985 when my dad bought it, and it was still roughly the same size. So, one person in the office, a couple people in the field, and my grandfather, the owner, and then my dad, Paul, took over, and he ran it from 1985 to 2016 when I took it over, and it had grown from 3 or 4 people to 7 to 8. So there were obviously some momentous things that happened in that 50-year period, but it always feels very weird to abbreviate it. But it's really most of the company, it grew very slowly. We stayed in the same building. We just moved out of that building 6 months ago. So we'd been in that building for 63 years, 64 years. And things really started moving in the early, 2010, 2012. So okay. I entered the business and we started moving forward kind of rapidly.
Okay. So do you feel like you were growing up in and around this business? Was it in the back?
Yeah.
Were you working weekends, summer jobs there, or was it just kind of in the background?
Yeah. So I'm always fascinated to know what other people who grew up with family businesses think about their family business. But the one thing I've tended to notice is no one thinks that they're going to work inside the family business. So I remember I talked to Justin Reeder a couple years ago, and he works in his family business, and he was embarrassed about it. He's like, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe I ended up in my family business." And I'm like, "Bro, like you're killing it. Like you're this is a win. Like any way you look at this is a win." And I think it feels like you didn't do your own. Well, you didn't do your own thing, right? Mm-hmm. So for most of my life growing up, I did work in the business. I started working at about 10, just in summer. My dad would pay me $5 a day, and I would, clean up trash and put away parts in the warehouse. And I would go with him on estimates, and I was exposed to the business. But I really never thought that I would take it over. And I honestly fought it pretty hard all the way up until I was 21 or 22. I did take over the business very young. That's a core part of the story. But for a long time, I fought that. So, graduating high school, I went to college initially for graphic design. And I ended up getting sick, and I wasn't able to complete that program. So I needed to be able to work flexibly. I had to be able to take care of my health. So my father allowed me to work flexibly while I dealt with that, which took a couple years. And by that point, I was very exposed to the trades. So by 16, 17, I was able to repipe a small home, replace a furnace by 17, 18. I was a capable field professional when I was before 20. So I worked flexibly for a few years. I attempted to go back to school a few more times. I went for HVAC once. And then in my early 20s, I went back to school for accounting, and I did about 2.5 years of the program, which landed me around 23 years old. And that's where my college stopped. So I got married at 23. and I had actually taken over running the business at 23, and I was going to school full time at night. And I basically thought that one of those three things had to give, and it was school.
Okay. And so wait, so you're 23. Is this now 2016?
This would have been 2014.
So you kind of took it over. You were
I
de
took
facto
over,
leader, but you didn't officially buy it.
Right. So I was the service manager, sort of ops manager for a while. It's 8 people. So it wasn't that big or complicated. But at around 23, we started really talking about me buying into the business, which is obviously a ridiculous conversation to have. So I like to address the elephant in the room. I don't think that I'm brilliant, and I don't think that I'm impressive by me being young and this stuff happening. I think that my dad and I have a 40-some year age gap, and he was needing to find an exit for this business that was a third generation business. And I was present. I was wanting it by that point at 23. I had 2 years of accounting. I understood enough to be dangerous and understood what the opportunity was in front of me. And so he entertained a conversation that most people would obviously not entertain. Like a 23-year-old is obviously a very young person. So I wasn't anything special. It was a series of circumstances that I had nothing to do with that gave me an opportunity that I probably didn't deserve.
Well, on the other hand, you're his son, and one of the whole patterns in our world is that there's all these baby boomers who are selling to us searchers,
Yes.
because their children don't want the business. So there was probably a part of him that was happy that it was going to stay in the family. When you talked about other people who don't want to stay in their family business, run the other way. So just to be clear, you were like that, and then eventually
100%.
came around to it, just gradually, just more exposure, and eventually, like, what was there a tipping point, or was it just this kind of gradual thing? And eventually, you had said, I understood the opportunity in front of me. Did something crystallize about the potential here, or what was it?
So I am a leader, or I'm maybe the better way to say this is I'm in the position that I am because nobody else took it. Not because potentially not because I'm the right person. I mean, now I have a track record that shows that I probably was, but that's still new to me. So, I was 23 years old and I was freshly married, and I was working still full time as a technician, and feeling like I was trapped is the best way to put that. So I was a technician in a very small business. There was no upward mobility inside that business because there's 8 to 10 people, and that was sort of it. And I wasn't feeling particularly stretched. So I'm a curious person. I sort of crave a challenge. And in most things that I do, I like to be challenged. I want to be intellectually stimulated. And I didn't feel that. So when I was 22 and 23, I was looking for an exit out of the family business. And I felt even more trapped because I had yet to graduate college. So I went back to accounting school, not to take over my family business, but with an expectation that I would leave the family business and go be an accountant somewhere. So the opportunity in front of me was sort of like, that was the only opportunity that made sense to me at that time, was I felt trapped by the choices that were in and out of my control. I had some medical stuff that wasn't totally my control, but the other decisions that came after that were. And I didn't feel challenged. And I started going to school and understanding, hey, maybe I can do some of what I'm learning about and reading about here in this business. So that is when it started to crystallize as maybe this could work. but it sort of came from a point of desperation, honestly.
Well, how interesting that, you kind of saw it as the only path to do something that you thought checked the boxes that you wanted to check, was to actually, rather than run away from the business, run toward it. That ended up being the solving for the things you wanted.
I thought that I was on my way out, and by moving in that direction, I found my way in.
Well, it's also, I think, probably people in family businesses who do stay in family businesses eventually learn this or whatever. The way you, quote, do your own thing within a family business is you make it your own. So now this business today, sure, you weren't the founder, but you for what it is today is a completely different animal, which we're about to hear about, than it was before. So you probably, I imagine, feel like you sure as hell have done your own thing.
Yes. I feel a lot more confident now than I did, 7 years ago in what I could do. And I was young, very young.
Yeah. Did you have any hesitation, now kind of putting on our searcher hats here, did you have any hesitation that the business had grown so little? It was basically the same size for 30 years under Ralph, your grandfather's tenure.
Yeah.
And then it had doubled, but just to 7 or 8 people under your father. Did you think maybe you'd get it to 16 people if you were lucky, sort of thing? Or were you like, did you see the potential to do what you've done with it that early? Did you see that?
I went into it. My dad and I were texting about this actually earlier, because I informed him of the win today that, hey, we did more revenue this month than 2017. Dad, that's crazy. So we were texting about that, and we were reflecting back on those conversations in text tonight. And I was very deliberate at the time. So you had 2 questions. One, was I cautious that it hadn't grown? No, because I knew why it hadn't grown, and it's not a mystery. I'm very happy to break it down. That really didn't bother me at all, because I just assumed that I was going to be able to do it, and I ended up being right. But obviously that could have gone the other way. And 2, I went into it with the intention of making the largest licensed home service company in Northeast Ohio, which in those past 7 years I have done. We have succeeded at that goal. But I went into it with that goal. Like that was what I was going to do. So he and I were texting about that tonight, and it was just sort of like, wow, what a journey. Like we did it, when I was 24 or 25 and we were talking about acquiring this business, like that was it. I said I would do it, and I did it. And that's crazy. Yeah.
I love it. John. I love your humility. It's great. By the way, so family business, graphic design, dalliance in graphic design, then in accounting. Were you a natural entrepreneur? Was that something that was ever written in the stars? No.
Not in any way.
Interesting.
I am fiercely independent, and I have been like that for a very long time. So I saw, I've really never trusted anyone's authority besides my own, is the best way to put that. Like, I called my teachers by their first name because I felt that if they were calling me by their first name, then that's how that should work. I bought my own first car with my own money at 15. I made sure I had my own cell phone plan at 14 or 15. I wanted to be in control of my own stuff. And money was the conduit to do that. So I don't think that I was, I wasn't like launching pinball businesses or lemonade stands or any of those stories that you hear. I just really did not trust anybody else to take care of me other than me. And that seems to have worked. But it was much more of a, I need to be independent and need to be self-sufficient than I need to launch a business.
Interesting. I've never heard that quality kind of before. I'm not sure if it has a name. I guess the need to control.
Stubbornness.
Well, you can be stubborn and not be so independent. I mean, it's a combination of,
Yeah, I think
It's
independence is
super
the
indep- yeah,
best
maybe
way
it's just
for
independent.
it because
Yeah.
it's not control. Like I run, I have to delegate a lot. That's a core part of my responsibilities, and
Yeah.
I have no issue doing that. I would have a big issue if someone owned a majority of the company and I had to listen to them.
Yep.
Like
Yep.
I want to be in the driver's seat, and I've
Yep.
wanted to be in the driver's seat since I was probably born.
Mhm.
So like I struggle with the authority piece and like who's calling the shots, because I ultimately believe that I'm going to call the best shots.
Did I say humility earlier?
You know, I'm a mix. I'm a mix of both.
Yeah.
I'm confident where I can be, but I also realize that so much of this was luck.
Yeah.
And it just was.
Okay, John. Well, like I said, we're not going to be able to go year by year here.
Yeah.
So I'm going to need you to guide me at the important
We can do the
kind of
we can do the big
milestones.
hits. We can do the big
The big
hits.
hits. Sounds like if this first acquisition. Well, I'll let you tell us. So what's the first big hit?
Yeah, so there's probably 5 big hits, career defining hits for me. So not counting acquiring my family's business. So the second one was in February of 2018. We're on the eve of that anniversary tonight as we record. So that business was in late 2017. I was frustrated by the lack of growth inside the company. We had achieved $1.7 million of revenue, and that is very tough to feed 2 owners on. And again, I was deliberate that if I was going to join and do this, like we were going to grow a large company. So
Who was the second owner? Still your dad or
my
somebody else?
father maintained an interest. Yeah. Yep. So I started sending letters. Someone in my industry locally bought another business, competitor. And obviously I kind of knew that was possible because I just had bought my family's company. So it wasn't like a foreign concept to me. It was a foreign concept to me that you could grow by smashing them together. Brand new. I'd never heard of that before. So I was interested. I sought to figure it out. And I just sent a bunch of letters. I'm sure I read a book or a blog. I wasn't very informed about how to do it. We basically figured it out. But I sent about 100 letters to companies that I roughly knew that I could acquire because they were very small. So we were 1.7 in sales at the end of 2017, and we had 4 or 5 companies respond to those letters. And one of those companies was a business that we had made contact with a few years prior that reached out saying that they would like to be acquired. We didn't close the deal, and I don't know why. But after 6 or 7 months, we closed that deal in early 2018. So they had, we had 13, 14 people at the time. They had maybe 10. They were doing $750,000 of revenue and dropping, and they had lost money every year since 2009. They went bankrupt in 2009, and they had been surviving off of a line of credit as they attempted to turn the business around into a service organization because it used to be new construction. So that was a pivotal moment for me for a few reasons. One, I was 26, and I had obviously no idea what I was doing. The business doubled overnight, like stroke of a check, and the business doubled, which was, I just remember that feeling of like, oh my God, like this is crazy. You can just do this and acquire your way to growth. The team size doubled. So I went from 14 people that I'd like basically grown up with. They'd all been there for a very long time. They knew me. They got it, to managing an outside party of 10 people that were all twice my age. And on top of that, the business was going bankrupt. So we had to figure out how to turn it around so it didn't sink the whole ship. So what followed was a difficult year.
John, why did you buy that business versus a couple of the others that had responded to your letters?
Because I could afford it. I could afford it.
So it was given that it was distressed, it was cheap.
Cheap.
Mm.
Yeah, it was $110,000. So I changed my life for $110,000. So we ended up signing a 6-year seller note. The final payment is tomorrow. And I gave 20 or 30 grand down, which was probably 80% of the cash that I had on hand. So we doubled the business overnight, learned how to manage a team of 27 people or so off the rip. The business, instead of being 1.7, ended up closing 2018 at 2.9, which was a pretty big jump. And we were excited about it. So that was it was a big exposure because I got 2 managers out of it. So suddenly I had managers that had never been a thing before, and I had to figure out how to work with managers. We jumped on ServiceTitan shortly before that. So we had to figure out how to actually measure things, like what the heck are we actually doing here? About a day or 2 into the acquisition, the schedule was empty. Like there was nothing on the board. So we had to figure out how to market. So I didn't go bankrupt. So we had to figure that out in February of 2018. And we figured out how to turn a new construction company around, which was a skill that we've now used several times. But all of that was learned in that second acquisition. So it was a pivotal moment of my career. Like when I think about the moment that took me from the small business owner to this can become something real, it was that acquisition.
Yeah. Yeah. And because it was your first.
Business. It was our first, but it also professionalized it. It added managers. We had to figure out how to build teams. We had to figure out how to market. We had to suddenly figure out entirely new capabilities that we had never had. And it forced us to level up. So in 2017, we did 1.7, and 2018, we did 2.9, and in 2020, we did 3.8 or 3.9. So we added another $1 million 2 years back to back as we learned those new skills and how to run a larger company.
And through the pain of that year, that your first acquisition and all the things that you described that came with it, it was hard, but were there low moments? Were there fetal position moments? Or did it not get that bad?
Oh yeah. No,
were there?
For sure did.
Like real panic?
Yes. Oh yes. So it was a year after, and I thought we were going to go bankrupt in early 2019. So the first year of an acquisition is like a lot. And now, I know the steps. So I know the stages of grief as you'd think of them now. But those first 3 months are like honeymoon, where you're getting to know everybody, you're figuring out the systems, figuring out the customers, training, all that stuff. Second 6 months, you start to work on performance, which we did. But we never killed the new construction side of the business. And this was my first exposure to new construction. I didn't understand it. All I saw was really big tickets. So wow, we just did $100,000 a month, in just plumbing install. Like that's a big deal. That's crazy. And, I didn't understand what that looked like for cash flow. That was a brand new thing for me. And by the way, it's bad. I didn't understand what happens when somebody doesn't want to pay you $100,000. We found out, but, that was new. So we learned a lot about the other side of the industry, this low margin, highly cyclical section of the industry. So a year into our acquisition, the business was floundering as we tried to deal with the new construction. So we had merged the locations by that point. We had prepped to merge the brands, and we were stuck with this new construction team. And it was the first time, not the last time, but the first time that I've ever had to do mass layoffs. So early 2019, fetal position, mass layoffs. We let about 20 or 30% of the team go.
Oh, wow.
Yep.
Okay. Well, that first hit ended badly, but was transformative, as you said. Your first taste of acquisition, open your eyes, professionalize the business. Okay, what's the next milestone in this journey?
Yeah, next milestone was late 2019. So 2019 became a recovery year, which should, I think, happen if you're an operator and you are acquiring to grow. You can run too fast, and you need to digest. Like, the organization has to figure itself out. So 2019 was that year for us. So we figured ourselves out. And at the end of 2019, we joined a group called, it was SGI. Now it's called Certain Path. And that was the next big thing for us. So we, $3.9 million of total revenue. Team size was maybe 30, 27, somewhere in there. And what that gave to us was a model. I still wasn't educated. I had like somewhat of an idea of what I was doing during my day-to-day life, but it really felt like I was grasping at straws. And some things worked and some things didn't. So what Certain Path did was it gave us a model to follow. Like, hey, here's an org chart that your business should roughly look like at this size, and this size. Here's a rough idea of what pricing can and should look like. Here's a few examples of how to structure your company. Here's how to do your handbook. So this was the next level of professionalization. But instead of like, here's how to work with managers, it's here's how to run your business. So it gave us a sort of a business in a box without it being a franchise.
And John, so Certain Path, is it like a Nexstar and some of these that basically give you the playbook? It's the playbook. Industry. Yeah. Tell people in 30 seconds what it is. You pay, it's a membership, they give you a playbook.
Yeah, you just did it in 3 seconds. I mean, that is what it is. It's the playbook. Now, at Certain Path does it for smaller companies. Certain Path was started with this concept of let's get the owner out of the truck. So their average company size is small. Whereas Nexstar, their average company size is much larger. I believe I think they've relaxed the rules at Nexstar, but you used to have to be 5 or 7 million at a minimum to even apply to be in Nexstar. Whereas SGI would take someone at 200,000.
And these are what industries do these
plumbing,
groups?
HVAC, electric, and roofing. I believe they both do roofing.
Okay. All right.
Yep. But yeah, so that changed our business, and that helped us figure ourselves out. And in that time, the owner, who came from the business I bought in 2018, he was our ops manager. So I actually kept him on for a year and a half, and he was getting ready to retire. And I had to hire someone to implement this business in a box. So I hired my then ops manager, now COO and president, Brandon Nairo. And he came in and helped me implement Certain Path, or SGI, into our business so that we could take the company to the next level. So that was sort of a twofold big hit because, one, Brandon joined the team, which obviously has been instrumental in what we've done. And two, we put a lot more process and systems in place.
The Certain Path in like an EOS, is it kind of like an industry specific EOS, or am I comparing apples and oranges?
Apples and oranges. So okay. EOS is a way you meet, it's a way you talk, it's a way you communicate organization wide. We are on EOS. This is really a playbook. The best way to think about Nexstar or Certain Path is this is a franchise without a franchise. Like that's it. So when you sign up for a group like this, which most industries have one, and I highly recommend everyone do it because it gives you the next step, which that is really hard to figure out what the next step is. Because there's not like I haven't found one, but there's not like a playbook out there on how to do what I've done. Like there's not like here's how you go from 1 million to 100 million in 10 years. Like I haven't found one yet. If you know of one, please send it my way. But it helps you figure out what's next, and it gives you something to constantly work on and improve and iterate and implement into your business. So that's what we liked about it. And it also, one of the reasons I liked it so much is I was working with managers, and I think I'm better now than I was 5 years ago. but communicating vision and communicating the why and giving people a clear set of guidelines on how to go do the thing was a real challenge at that time. And those business in a box systems make it easier, or at least made it easier for me. Like, hey, here's what we're going to implement. Here's this thing that's already pre-made. I don't have to reinvent the wheel. Here you go. Now we can just focus on the most important things. So best way to think about it is like a franchise that you don't have to pay royalties on. Now, granted, you have to pay money. It was 30 or 40 grand a year, but you don't have to pay royalties.
Right.
It's not
so
like
it's not a percentage of
it's
revenue.
not a percentage of revenue. Yeah, it's a membership that you're a part of.
Great. Well, that was a compelling pitch for Certain Path, given that it was.
Yeah, I mean, we actually just left Certain Path, and I talked to Rebecca, the president and CEO, and she was asking why we left, and I explained to her that we'd sort of run out of things to implement, and there was no more roadmap. Which, okay, and I have nothing but great things to say about the program, because when we started that program, we were $3.8 million, and when I'm leaving, like, we're going to do $26 million this year.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I have nothing but good things to say. Like, yes, we ran out of things to work on inside that program, but that just means we have to go to the next one. But it's a great program. If you're really under 5 million, that's like a awesome program.
Great.
Yep.
Next hit.
We had been, and so we used to be based out of Akron, which that's weird to say, but we had been based out of the same building for 60 years. And Akron is a small town, 200,000 people in the metro, and about 500,000 in the county itself. Now, with the addition of that other business in 2018, our total service area was 800,000 people in population. The downside of that is the metro was shrinking, so population was going down. And some of the legislation and some of the politics in those two towns scared me for the future of Akron, which is tough if that is the only place that you are doing work. So the next big hit was understanding that and seeing that as a very tangible risk to our business and figuring out what to do about it. Now, fortunately, we are only 30 or 40 minutes south of Cleveland. Cleveland's population is 3.5 million. Despite being only 30 or 40 minutes south, we had never done work in Cleveland one time ever in the history of the company. So it was a very sort of shocking change for everyone that we would suddenly start driving up to Cleveland. That was a big deal. But the population to serve was just so much larger. And if it was shrinking, it certainly wasn't shrinking at the sort of same pace that Akron and Canton were shrinking. So that was the next big move, was expanding our market. So we bought a very small company up there, like $500,000 a year, which I guess was 12% of annual revenue, so maybe not that small at the time. And we signed a lease for a spot up there, probably too soon. Like, now I would do that differently. And we set up a Google My Business, and we launched a little Cleveland location. We did basically everything wrong when launching that location. So it wasn't really the launch. Like, launching the location was more like a list of things to never do when launching a location. But I don't know. I was 27, 28.
Wait, sorry, John. Why was it a launch if you bought a brand that was already up there? Because you got
They
rid of
didn't
their
have a
brand.
location. Yeah, they didn't. One, we did get rid of their brand, and two, they didn't have a location. They ran out of the guy's garage.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. So the next big hit was expanding into a new market within proximity of us. So we tried for a few years, a few different, we tried to run this location and that location and like, hey, let's launch this location. And ultimately, it didn't really work out the way that we thought it would or wanted it to. And really, that's only been like cleaned up in the past year. But people were dispatched differently. What we should have done is just built a mega location, but we didn't. But the important part was we expanded our available market, and that gave us just millions more customers to serve.
And so despite all of the wrong things that you did,
We tripped forward.
Yeah. And so you did pretty immediately feel the pull of a much larger market, the tailwind of a much larger market.
It worked. Now it wasn't clean, it wasn't neat, it didn't grow the way we wanted it to, but in our very first year, which was 2020, up in Cleveland, we did 400,000 in an area that we'd never done, anything. So we considered that to be a success.
Okay, great.
Yep.
But still based in Akron. Go ahead. Next hit.
Yeah. So the next big hit was 2021. I was feeling antsy. So the way we used to distribute roles, the way we used to distribute roles has changed a lot over the years. As you can likely imagine, the business is very different and has gone through a lot of iterations, even just in the 4 years that Brandon and I have worked together. A lot of different levels there. So I felt like I didn't have anything to do, which I didn't, but that's sort of the wrong way to look at it at that size of a company. And so I was feeling antsy, and I was sort of like, hey, I need the next big thing of growth, because all I could think about, I even I had it written in my gym at home, 10 million. That's all that I could think about was breaking 10 million and how to get across that magical number. Mind you,
and where were you at the end of 2020?
4.2 or 3.
Okay.
So we hadn't even crossed 5. Just like now, I'm obsessed with hitting 100, and I haven't crossed 50. But I think that's just how I work. So that's all I could think about, and it's really difficult to grow when you're under $5 million. And now looking back, I understand it a lot more than I did. But I mean, mainly just resource constraint, and whether that resource is time or money or talent, but there is a massive resource constraint when you're under 5, you're a small business. And I just we weren't moving fast enough. We just weren't moving fast enough. So the next big hit was in 2021, I started looking for acquisitions again. And
John, let me ask you why, since 2018, way back now, 3 years ago at the time, had opened your eyes to acquisition. Yeah. Why had that not? I kind of had the impression that immediately became your playbook for growth, but it sounds like it wasn't. It sounds like you just did acquisitions strategically, going to Cleveland, but it wasn't. You didn't treat it as the incredible unlock to get to 10 million, 50, and 100 million quite yet.
No. I think I said this earlier, but the digestion phase matters a lot. So if you grow 50% or 100% in a year, that has ripple effects, a lot of them. So, this January, we did 72% more revenue than I did last January. That was not neat or clean or process driven. That was messy as hell. We almost doubled. That's ridiculous. In a 12-month time period, we almost doubled. So you just need to digest, and you have to figure out who you are. And Trish Higgins from Chenmark has talked about this a couple times, once at Holco Conf, and she's written about it in her weekly newsletter, which I recommend everyone read. It's one of my favorites. And she talks about when they first launched Chenmark, they bought, it was either 12 or 14 landscape companies in an 18-month period. And then they stopped, and they sat on their hands for 3 years, and they figured out who the heck they were as an organization. And they digested. And that's what we did in 2019. We're I wanted to go do more deals. But even though it was only 2.7 million, I still had no clue what I was doing. We had a team that didn't really know what they were doing. I was working in the largest business I'd ever worked in. I've never worked at anywhere else. Like, this is it. So I didn't have a playbook on like, how do you build an accounting team, or how do you build a call center, or how do you hire managers, or do any of it. So we had to figure that out, and throwing more deals on top of that wasn't going to be the right play.
Yeah.
That's the only thing I did know. So we've basically bought a company every year for the past 5 or 6 years. We've never not done a deal. This year will probably be the first year I don't do a deal, which is kind of funny. But we're also going to grow 70 or 80% year over year organically. So like I just got too much going on to go do a deal and make a mess. So we digested.
It's 2021, you're antsy.
Yeah.
And you feel like there's
antsy.
been enough digestion.
There's been enough digestion. Hey, we've got some process. We're a little over a year into SGI. Like, we know how pricing works. Our gross profit's in the right spot. We know how to hire techs. We get it. We know the model. I'm ready to move to the next stage because I feel like I've been solving the same problems for 4 years. I'm ready to move on to more interesting problems. So we started looking for acquisitions. Followed a similar playbook that I had done a few times now, because by this point we'd bought 2 or 3 other companies, so I was maybe up to 4 total. But the other ones were very small, like names and phone numbers, so not worth mentioning in the quick hits. And we ended up getting a lot of bites in 21 on companies that were open to having a conversation. I had just found out earlier in 2021 what the SBA was. So I was 4 acquisitions in. I had never heard of the SBA. And every deal that I had ever done up to that point was cash and seller notes. So that was the only way that I knew how to buy companies, was cash and seller notes. So a lot of people make fun of me because every deal that we have has a large seller note component. Many of them, even my 2 most recent deals were both still mostly seller note, because that's how I know how to, that's how I learned how to buy companies. So I learned what SBA was, which was really interesting, and it opened up my ability to buy, because I had previously been buying very, very small companies, and now I'm like, oh, hey, maybe I can buy some bigger ones. So we talked to hundreds of companies in 2021. It was fascinating. I really got under the hood of just so many different businesses in my area, and we bought 3 of them. So 2021 was a fascinating year for us because we were still pretty small, and I had mostly run the business debt-free up to this point. And this is, you asked me before we recorded, why do I advocate for buying small? And that's why I advocate for buying small, because you can figure out the business, you can figure out yourself, and when you are actually ready to go do something interesting, you probably have a really nice balance sheet. So we had taken the business up to $4 some million of revenue. We had a strong balance sheet, very lendable balance sheet. So we bought the first company in July of 2021. We bought the second company 90 days later in September of 2021. And we bought the third company 90 days after that in December of 2021. So in 2021, we went from 32 employees to 105. And we went from the 4 million of revenue to a run rate in the 13, 14 range. And that
what happened to the digesting?
That happened in about that. Well, I spent 2.5 years digesting after that. So that's where I disappeared off Twitter for a while. But so it was a sprint. And I was really, maybe it was stupid, but it worked. So I'm saying this and I'm like, I don't know that I advise people to do that. The next 2 years were kind of hell, but it did work. So if you're ready, put your big boy pants on. But yeah, so we quadrupled revenue, and we tripled headcount in 150 days, which, as you can imagine, broke everything. No process that we had at 30 people worked at 105 people. We had roles that we had never imagined having, like full-time payroll clerks. We had our first HR person. We had to bring on marketing people. We went from 2 managers to like 15 or something overnight. And I had no idea how to run a leadership team, let alone a senior leadership team, which is what we had to turn into. The whole company, it just exploded in growth and process breaking. But it was a wild and exciting 5.5 months, and that was the next quick hit. I mean, that put us roughly where we are today, right? So 2021 was an absolutely ridiculous growth year, where in 5.5 months we quadrupled top line revenue.
Wow. And so since from then through 2022, you were really digesting.
Oh yeah, through all the way through 2023. It was through 2023 very full years of digestion. Yeah.
And so things finally stabilize, and you come back you're roaring back onto Twitter about 6 months ago or whatever it was, 5 months
ago. Basically. So,
okay.
Yeah, like, look, you got to figure yourself out. And there was all this, everyone listening is likely much smarter than I am. So they probably don't need to be told this, but like the processes and the way you run a business at 3-4 million is obviously very different than how you run it at 15 to 20. And we had to learn it. I'm still going back to, this was every day I'm in the largest business I've ever worked in, like every day. Mm-hmm. That's my reality every single day. I have to hire smart people. I have to, do everything that you would expect and want to do. But it's still my job to lead them and drive the bus. So we had to figure out all these things that I'd never had to figure out. And it took a long time. The first few that we had to figure out was pricing. Next was recruitment. Software was a big one. And it broke every part of our business, leadership and how we transition leadership and succession. So it broke every aspect of our business over the course of a year and a half. And then, which sort of leads us to the fifth one, or the fourth one. Yeah, it would lead us to the fourth career-altering hit.
I thought we were done. What is that?
Well, we moved. So the businesses, when we bought them, we ran them in separate locations with separate brands for 18 months to help the integration be smooth. So over the last 6 months, what's happened and why I've become a little bit more active is they all merged legally and they all merged physically. So the business, last June, we put them all into one facility. And ever since then, it's been a J curve of growth as all of our, 2 some years of effort that we'd sort of compounded started taking root and moving the business forward.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, John, one of the thank you for that.
It's like it's entertaining. Like I don't know. Like I'm probably not giving myself enough credit. Like obviously there was some thought behind it and some strategy, and I'm sure that I'm like beating up on myself a little bit. But looking John, back, it was ridiculous. This was insane. I can't believe it worked.
Well, maybe it wasn't ridiculous going into it. It was only ridiculous that you reflecting back.
Yeah.
But John, I mean, look, going through your Twitter thread as I did to prepare for this interview.
Yeah.
You're not, licking your finger and checking the wind. I mean, you have real deep expertise.
There's something between my ears.
Things very strategically. Yeah, come on.
Yeah. It just like looking back, it's such a ridiculous series of decisions that have led me to be here today. That's really all it is. I think it's like, it's wild. And when you look back over a long enough period of time, you're like, wow, like I can't believe, like, obviously we did things right. Obviously, we're, I don't even know, like 1,000 some percent in growth when I took it over. I've hired hundreds of people. It's sort of like I don't feel the need to boast about it because like the track record's there, and it's more like it's comical that it worked because it's just crazy. Like it's been a journey.
Well, I guess, you had referred earlier to you getting into the business as there was a lot of luck in that because you had access to it because it was your family business. But now talking more about the growth and particularly those 3 acquisitions 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And you kind of laughing like how ridiculous it was and it worked.
Yeah.
But almost like it was almost like you're kind of implying that it was poor judgment going into it. So did you get lucky that it worked?
I would say it worked almost exactly as intended. And I think that that's the thing that's ridiculous is at 23 years old, I was like, hey, I'm going to build the largest licensed home service company in Northeast Ohio. And at 32, I did it. And roughly every major strategy that I put into place worked, which is ridiculous. For a person who just earlier in this podcast, like I dropped out of college 3 times and I took over the business at 25. And I'm sure I could list off thousands of mistakes, and anybody that works with me could probably list off more, but like we still did it, which is crazy.
Yeah.
I don't know that there's really a lesson there other than, it's fun. I just can't believe it worked. I can't believe it worked the way I thought it would.
Let me ask you this, John. Is maybe it worked because a lot of the businesses that you're competing with are kind of like what your business was before you got in there with young, hungry, aggressive blood, that it's just still sleepy. Now, I doubt that's the answer because all we hear about is how hot home services and HVAC and plumbing is. So there's got to be a lot of hungry sharks and PE folks and people like you out there. I see them on Twitter. I know them. Yeah. But still, maybe some of that is a little bit biased where, I know the people who are doing this stuff. So it seems like everybody's doing it. But in fact, when you look at the universe of businesses across plumbing and across HVAC, licensed home services, as you said, it's really just a tiny sliver of people who are actually being aggressive.
Yeah. I think that's a part of it. What it ultimately would boil down to in my mind is we got the big things right. We bought a small business and we figured out how to run it debt free. So we had a good balance sheet and good cash management skills. We learned how to acquire and we bought companies at the right time. We used the right softwares. We figured out how to market at the right time, which there definitely was a right time, and it was 7 years ago. And I think we just got the big stuff right. And when I look at companies that have floundered in the same time period that we have exploded, if there's 10 core decisions that put us where we are, they missed half of them. And for whatever reason, I don't know. But like ServiceTitan is a core decision. And I talk about it often. I don't get paid by ServiceTitan, but like that was a core decision because there are just very few softwares out there. As far as I'm concerned, only one that allows you to run a licensed home service business at scale. That's a core decision. And if you mess that decision up, you are preventing yourself from getting to scale so that you can save a few dollars on software fees. Like you're saving 10 grand to lose millions. Like that's the actual decisions that's being made. That's
John,
one example.
I've seen you tweet about like I think in your local market there's like a PE roll up, and it's just going terribly. Like the wheels are coming off.
Hemorrhaging.
Like so, for example, you probably have some intel there. Like what's going wrong in their case, for example.
I mean, the big thing that they're getting wrong is 2 big things: how you treat your people. That's not complicated. And marketing. So this company They rolled up 10 groups and they cut all their marketing spend in half. Like, how is that a good decision? In any way, any time, not an exaggeration, any time the economy looks like it's taking a break, it looks like we're in for a rough patch, it looks like anything rough is on the horizon, we have always doubled or tripled down on advertising. Always, like consistently. Like the world shuts down in COVID, I tripled my ad spend overnight. And we grew.
But can you explain that, John? Because that is pretty counterintuitive. I mean, is it just advertising becomes cheaper?
I actually don't understand how it's counterintuitive. Like, to me, that is intuitive. I really can't understand how someone, that's like cutting off your hand. Like, it just doesn't make sense to me. Like, if you're trying to run a marathon and you chop a leg off under the knee, like, I really can't understand how people do that.
Well, I guess they become cash conscious. They become conservative because they're shoring up their own balance sheets because they're preparing for winter.
Yeah. But
that, I guess would be
like,
I know it's short-sighted, perhaps. But it seems, it's for the same reason consumers, everybody belt tightens in a downturn.
The downward, like if you look at the secondary, it's like, okay, hey, we have less leads. So I'm going to spend less money, which means we're going to have less leads.
Right.
Which means I'm going to make less money, which means I'm going to lose my talent. Like, that's a perilous road, and it's really hard to come back from it. So it's never really been a temptation. I really don't understand. Like, I can't even get my brain wrapped around that idea. But some companies obviously do that. A lot of companies probably do. So they cut their ad spend in half, and big surprise, they lost all their talent, many of them to me. So thank you guys. I appreciate that. And then the other one was how they treated their people. So you want to know a great way to piss off a high producer is to change his commission structure to the company's benefit. Just don't do it. And if you do, expect to lose them. To me, who won't do that? So, yeah. So, two core decisions. How are you going to treat your people? How are you going to treat your highest performers, the people that drive you dollars? And are you going to cut revenue, or are you going to cut ad spend the moment you feel a breeze?
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I don't think either one's very complicated.
John, we're already getting into kind of theme stuff here, which I want to spend a lot of time on. But before we pivot hard to that, let me just get to wrap up your story, kind of the forward-looking bit of your story. You've been kind of vocal and putting out a lot of content around the big plan to get to $100 million now. So give us just a couple minutes on how you going to do that.
Yeah. So, moving from the I don't know what I'm doing, John, to I do have an idea of what I'm doing, John. Totally different parts of my personality, by the way. Different stages of a company requires a different leader. And when you break past these very specific plateaus or milestones, or however you want to think about them, it requires often a different person. And I am fiercely independent and determined to always just be able to be that person. So what that has, and I'm getting to the answer. I think it's just relevant to walk people through the journey. I've had to reinvent myself 6 or 7 times now, and I'm prepping for the next one, because each plateau requires a totally different person at the helm. And I'm determined to be that totally different person because I was given an opportunity that I did not deserve at an age that no one should have given it to me. And I'm determined to earn that seat for the rest of my life. Just like any outsider or anyone else inside the company would earn their seat, I'm determined to earn mine. So the 100 million, I stopped needing money relatively early in my life. Like, the business outgrew my personal consumption. I live a simple life. I drive a Ford Ranger. I don't know, 2 kids, a dog. I love my wife, love my kids. I don't need a lot of money personally. So I struggled for a few years there I had more money than I know what to do with. The business was like large-ish, and I had really just no idea what I would do with the extra money, because I have no desire to go buy a Lamborghini or something. So, it took about 2 years. I was 28 when that first started, and I realized that the thing that excites me is I want to build something big and meaningful. I want to really build something, and I want to be a force of good in the lives of people around me. And that's why I get up every day, and that's why I do the thing I do, and that's why I get to show up to work with a smile every day, is because that is what juices me up, is those two things. So when I think about 100 million, even when I think about 20, I have been able to impact thousands of lives, which is just, like I was a plumber who dropped out of college a couple times a decade ago. And I've been able to impact thousands of lives, 140 of which are under my direct employ. So I get to very, very positively impact them. But because of the size of our business, we've created a real ripple in our community. We've created real economic advantage for our vendors, and we've created value for our customers. So my impact to the community is measurable, which is cool. And I love that. And watching people on my team, like we have people on our team who started 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago, and in that time, their income has quadrupled. Wow. Because of the opportunity that we have inside our business. I didn't do that. We created something that gave people the opportunity to go earn what they want and what they deserve, which has been incredible. And so we've been able to really directly change lives, and it's exciting to think like, wow, like we've changed so many people's lives for the better. And I sincerely believe that I'm a positive part of people's lives. Like, what type of impact could we have if we were at 100 million compared to 20? Like, I could impact tens of thousands of lives in my community. Like, we could create something that would really help people, because I don't need the money. Like, it is not about me anymore. So I think that the business moving beyond me and my personal consumption habits to, hey, this can be about more, and that's cool that it's about more, and other people are deeply impacted by the decisions that we make, is, I don't know, it's intoxicating. It's fun. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So 100 million means that I get to make a huge impact on my community, and I get to build something meaningful, which I determined a few years ago was why I get out of bed. So that excites me. Mm-hmm. So that was the inspiration for it. Yeah, but it's still cool. Like, someone approached me 2 weeks ago, and we transitioned him from one department to the other, and it was like Thursday at like 4 p.m. or something like that. And he walked up and he's like, dude, I just got to thank you. Like, my income doubled in the last 6 months. Like, I can't believe this opportunity was available. I can't believe like you helped me get there and like did the stuff. And it was just like, one, like I didn't, like he did that, right? Like he earned that. But two, like, hell yeah. Like, mm-hmm. Like, that's cool. That's cool. And like, I want to be able to do that with 1,000 people. That sounds like fun.
That's amazing.
So the reason's not that deep. I want to build something meaningful, and I want to be
very deep.
A force of good in the lives of the people around me because I built something meaningful.
That was beautiful, John, and I use that word. I use that word carefully. But just give us a little bit, because we got still some stuff I want to make sure we have time to cover. A little bit of the mechanics, of quadrupling a $26 million business to 100.
So I started the story of how a CEO needs a different leader, and there was actually a point to that before I started my TED Talk. So when you break past these plateaus, and we are just breaking out of the most recent one, so you sort of like you hit your head against the wall for a couple years until you finally get it. And maybe for us, it was like 6 months. I don't know. Felt like 5 years. And we're in the next stage of professionalism. So we are currently moving from a 3-tier org chart to a 4-tier org chart. Moving up one probably doesn't sound like a lot, but it changes quite a bit about my life, how I think about my role, how the team interacts with me, and how the business grows. And so the way that looks is now I am separated by, there's multiple tiers of managers between me and 90% of the organization. So how I think about communication every day has to change. How I think about promotions has to change. Career paths has to change. Driving our values and driving what we're all about. Like all of that has to change and be better so that we can continue to build something meaningful and be a force of good in everyone's life. So we got there and we finalized the move from a 3-tier to a 4-tier org chart. And the tiers are, executive, senior leadership, frontline leadership, individual contributors. And that took a while, and it happened between 15 and 20 million for us. Obviously depends on the industry, but home service, it tends to happen around that size. And all I can think about is I'm ready for the next one. Like I'm ready for the next big challenging plateau, because this new structure will roughly take us to $40 to $50 million rapidly. So, we expect it took a while to get to 26. We think 40 is at the end of 2026. So 2 years away, 2.5 years away. So it sort of starts to J-curve rapidly as you approach the next big plateau, and the next big plateau is, as I see it, the next line of leadership, team leads, a VP line, and a C-suite. So those have to be resolved somewhere between $40 and $50 million. But I can't back down from a challenge. I don't know. I like it. I think I can do it. I'm dumb enough to believe that I'm capable of taking this business to $100 million. And every time we break through a plateau, and every time I reinvent myself into whatever the business needs next, I become more and more confident that I am the person to do it. So that's where it's at now. So the mechanics of getting there is we think we have a mostly smooth road. It's sort of like more of the same, up to 40 or 50 million in the next few years. We do have a big challenge coming up between 40 and 50 million. And we see it far enough out that we're going to try to prepare for it as best we can. We're going to bring on the right people. We're probably going to struggle. It's going to be challenging. I've never had to do that, just like almost everything else I've ever done in my career. But I think I can do that too. So,
and sorry, what is the challenge?
C-suite, a line of VPs, and team leads. So we expect that's going to go from a 4-tier org chart to either a 5 or a 6, which is, every tier you add, communication is what breaks, and communication is what's going to break a company. And every tier is just a massive new complication of organization, and not even to mention just money, just plain money. $20 million business, I had to invest $2.2 million new dollars into payroll in order to break our most recent plateau. That's a lot of money. That's 10% of our revenue. And that's what that took in order to get the right people on the team to keep pushing. So massive reinvestment and learning.
Great. Okay, John. Well, thank you for the history of the Wilson Companies in a nutshell. It's very impressive and very inspiring. I want to now pivot to a couple of these topics that you've tweeted about and just have you riff on them. Because, even though you're pretty far away now from, the searcher out there who doesn't even own a business, you're in the community, you're seeing it on Twitter, a lot of folks like that, people who have already bought a business, or you probably know a lot of searchers who have yet to. So you got opinions, and you got to, and then of course from your perch, you just have a lot of experience on starting with. Let's do hiring an operator.
Yeah.
What are that's the idea of buying a business, putting in an operator is this kind of like thing that's dangled out there, but wiser heads will say it's a terrible idea. At the same time, I have had guests on who have done exactly that. And those episodes are very popular, prove it because they demonstrate that there is a way of doing this. So what do you say?
I would say I've mostly gotten this wrong. Okay. And I believe that if I had to do it again with my current knowledge, I would be able to do it well. So the core lesson there is it's possible, but it's difficult. I think the important stuff here is what are you looking for? What are you looking for? What strengths are they going to bring to the table? And how do you get them to know what you're all about? And those are the big complicated pieces that you have to solve when you're bringing on someone to run a business in your name. So, experience. That's not really just management. Like management is, it's not very complicated to find someone who's had the title manager somewhere. But what knowledge or core competency are they bringing to the table that you just don't have? Most of my mistakes that I've had have been around this idea of bringing on out of industry operators. So that was something that we worked on for a while. We generally believed, hey, if we can find a culture fit or someone that we believe is a culture fit, we can train the trade. And that was dumber than I thought it was. Very low success rate doing that. So what we now do still to this day is like if I'm hiring an HVAC manager, I'm looking for HVAC manager experience. Which most of the books say the opposite. But our hit rate on following conventional wisdom is like 1 out of 10, and our hit rate for following common sense is like 10 out of 10. So following common sense definitely wins for like background. Have they done what you're expecting them to do before? Not a complicated thing, but have they done exactly what you're expecting them to do before? So when we're interviewing for that position, we ask granular things. So we're interviewing for an HVAC service manager right now. Hey, what are your tech's average tickets? Like that's the measurement of how well you're going to do here. Because like, what are you currently doing? What's your track record? So that was something that we got wrong. Do a lot better at that now. The next one is what strengths do they bring? That's a personality thing. What do they bring that you don't have personally? So Brandon is my best example of that. He and I work very well together, and I'm just so blessed to have him. And I hope that he would say the same about me. And we just have very different strengths. We don't use the visionary operator thing, but ultimately, like, I bring a lot of ideas and energy to the table, and he helps put them in place. It's more complicated than that, but that's the general concept, is that we are opposites, and that works very well for us. And I would say that probably works best with most people. Have somebody that has the inverse strengths that you do. And then how are they going to figure out the company? That's a big one. And this is why we've started leaning, as the organization has grown and our talent pool is deeper, like we would much rather promote from within. Because they know, they get the company, they get the culture, they get what we're all about. And this does not mean you can't do it if you're buying a company. Some of our most successful promotions have been people from acquired companies. Like, they know the company. And just because you're acquiring it doesn't mean that you change the company at all. And what we have found consistently is that promotions inside an acquired company, like taking someone from their team that you believe has greater talent than is currently being utilized and moving them up into the organization to take over the owner's role, is the very best thing that you can do when you're acquiring a company. like 5 or 6 times. We've proved that right. They know the company, they get the culture, they understand the staff, they know the customers, and it's a much smoother transition. So I don't think you can't do it. I just think have those things in mind, and it's possible. Nowadays, we do hire people all the time to basically run either new things or the way our business works is we have verticals and teams, and each team at this point is a 7-figure P&L. So I don't know what size of company the average searcher is buying, but every manager that we're bringing in is going to run $1 million or multi-million-dollar business, sometimes up to $10 to $15 million. So plumbing is going to do 12 this year. And when we're bringing on managers, we just hired a plumbing service manager, and he's going to oversee $5 million maybe of sales. And I see that as very similar to hiring an operator, because it is hiring an operator. It's just that we have a little bit more of a base than somebody brand new.
Great.
And yeah, so I think it's possible. I think it's hard. And those are the 3 things that I would look out for.
Possible and hard. I feel like that's a theme of basically everything that you've done in your story, John.
Yeah.
Great.
I mean, you can do anything if you set your mind to it. Just buckle up.
Yeah. Buying small. So I won't belabor this. I think everybody in the audience knows, maybe I'll give 10 seconds. The bigger the company you buy, the better, the more room there is, the safer it is. Can be a little bit counterintuitive to one's emotions because it feels like it's riskier to, be somebody who goes and buys a business doing $1 million in SDE. So people are tempted to buy smaller, but a smaller business is a more fragile business. And in fact, the risk goes up. You tweeted at some point, this tweet might be a little bit stale now, so you can correct me or correct
okay.
it. Actually said, go buy a company that's doing 500,000 to $1 million in revenue. So that's a 200 to 400 SDE business, pretty small. Yeah. Why did you say that? Do you still agree with your former self?
Yeah. In this conversation, we talked about my journey from $1 million in revenue to 26 million. You can build something big from something small. And obviously you can build something big from something big. My reasons behind thinking that that's the right move is, I have to say it, but I am fiercely independent. So if I'm going to buy something, I have to be able to buy it just me. I don't want outside investors. I don't want to deal with anybody. I want to call the shots that I think are right. I want advisors, but I ultimately believe that I make the best decisions with the help of people that are smarter than me. So that's 1. 2, I think you can get your arms around it. There is a tangible risk when you buy a small business, and I'm not trying to downplay that. I don't want anybody to be like, you said it was perfect. It's not going to be perfect. If you have 5 employees and you lose one, you lost 20% of your team.
Right.
I get it. That is a tangible risk. But I like that you can build everything the whole way. It is a safer approach to growth. I've seen plenty of people buy larger companies and go bankrupt in the process. And you can say anything about that you want. You can say it was their fault. You can say it was economy. You can say it was whatever. And maybe they weren't even the right person to buy it. And I really think that a lot of searchers, smart folks, they have no idea what is the right, they don't even know what the job is going to look like. They have a conception of what the job's going to look like, but you don't know until you get punched in the face a few times on your first day. And I think that's it. It is a safer bet to me, despite the tangible risk. You can replace a staff member. It's hard to move your family out of your house. So the PGs are real. I've seen a lot of bankruptcies from people that just had no clue what they were doing. The business was too big to get their arms around. They didn't understand how to lead teams. They didn't understand how to talk to people. which honestly, talking to people is that's like that's important. Like if the only blue collar person that you have ever talked to in your life is the guy changing your oil in your car, like you shouldn't buy a blue collar business. Like you're not going to talk to them well. Like they will quit, and they probably should, because like you will likely approach them wrong. And I think people just don't get that. So I think that starting small lets you get your arms around the business, lets you build it the way that you want it and safer. And you can always go buy a ton of companies after you buy that first one. So one, I think it's safer. Two, you want to know how to get deal flow, already exist. Like even if you fake the company, but I get so many DMs or did when we were actively talking about our search more often. I'm like, man, how do you get so many deals? Like how do you get so much deal flow? And I'm like, like it is a very different conversation of like, hey, I'm John from Wilson. You see my trucks on the road. I would like to buy you. Then, hey, I'm, Billy from Everpine Capital. I will respect your legacy. Like it's a different conversation, and I'm going to get way more of a hit rate than you are. So if you want deal flow, buy something tiny. Mike Botkin proved this point perfectly. Like he bought a tiny little landscaping company, then he bought like 20 more, and then he sold the whole thing. You just get more deals as an active participant in the market. So you can always go buy bigger ones later. And frankly, it gets a lot easier.
Just to be clear on your point about deal flow, the point is like if you buy there are more of these small companies to buy, so you can get in the game faster. You can get in the game faster instead of 2.5 years of search. And two, once you get in the game, you get more deal flow. Like more owners will just reach out to you. We get a phone call a week, like unsolicited. I'm not looking for companies right now. We get a phone call a week asking if we'll buy them. They just call into our main office line. You get just a ridiculous amount of deal flow just because you exist as an active participant. I think it's kind of a hack to end up buying more companies later. So I think it's safer. You can get your arms around it. It gets you started faster, and it's a hack to get more deal flow. Okay, John. One other topic, and then we're going to close with a kind of a longer segment on and have you break down the entire universe of home services businesses based on a tweet, a great thread that you did. Okay, buying businesses overall. So this is Acquiring Minds. You have grown through acquisition. So maybe this one seems too obvious, like why are we talking about this? But the reason I have this on my list to talk about is because I've seen you in your tweets say both, this is so hard. You guys out here, the fact that this ETA thing is fashionable now and buying boring businesses is, the next way to get rich is ridiculous. You have no idea what you're up against and what this really feels like and looks like. And then I've also seen you say, it is a cheat code. It is amazing. It did unlock, and you've told us tonight, it did completely unlock our path. So I've seen you, and I'm not saying those things are contradictory. It's that you go hard on both kind of the optimism and the pessimism piece of this.
I believe they're both true. I could probably spend a lot of time on this. And I'm going to start with the obvious one, which is I did it. So, like it worked, right? I took a $1 million company and we turned it into a $26 million company, and we have a path to 100. That's ridiculous. And in no other scenario in my life would something like that be able to happen. So, obviously, it does work. And it is real. That's the first one.
Great. Let's stop the episode there. Let's end on that.
And like I'm just going to say this, the sort of the get rich thing. Like I already said it earlier in this episode, but money became not a concern for my family when I was in my 20s. Now, granted, I started early in my life, but so you can do it. You can achieve your financial and professional goals using ETA as a path. Absolutely possible. The big but that I have is, I think there's a few. So, one is timing, depending on the business. So, I've referenced luck a few times. I was lucky that my dad owned a plumbing company. Obviously, I was lucky that he was willing to sell his plumbing company to a 25-year-old. Those were obviously very big pieces of luck. The other big piece of luck was timing. Like, I walked into home service at this perfect window to walk into home service. The internet was just becoming a thing in home service. Google reviews weren't quite established. The biggest competitor in our market when I started, think about the biggest competitor in your market right now in their Google reviews. It's probably like 10, 20, 30,000 Google reviews. The biggest competitor in our market, which was $30 million a year a decade ago, so big company, had 100. And we had 9. So ServiceTitan was just coming out. There was no other software that allowed a company to run at scale. You want to know how many companies in the U.S. had over 100 trucks before 2010? Just probably count on one hand. You want to know how many now? A couple hundred. I mean, granted,
thanks to ServiceTitan, you're saying.
Thanks to technology in general, but ServiceTitan did have a big piece to play. But thanks to technology in general. Home services went through an Uberization. We just don't call it that. But it was hugely disrupted, where incumbent players that had had a dominant place in your market were suddenly exposed to guys like me. In the past 7 years, we have been able to take meaningful market share from people multiples of our size because the internet leveled the playing field. But the playing field is no longer level. So now you do have to compete with 10,000 Google reviews. That's really challenging to compete against because Google will give them more leads. That's just how it's going to work. They're going to serve them up more. So for this window of time, call it 2 or 3 years, the rules of the internet and lead gen weren't quite established. And the legacy players were not as strong in this new form of lead gen as they are now, or they used to be 10 years ago. And PE wasn't yet buying. So you didn't have these massive roll-ups coming in. So there was this 2 or 3 year window. And that's why I'm saying I was lucky. And I would say, and I believe Chris Hoffman would also agree, he bought his company the same year I did. And he benefited from the same tailwinds that I did. So this perfect moment of 2016, 17, 18, and 19, where you could establish dominance in an incumbent market. So timing plays a big role, is I think the big thing there. And pick your poison, pick your opportunity wisely. Don't buy a plumbing and HVAC company just because you think it's sexy. The right time to buy a plumbing and HVAC company was 5 years ago. It's a much different game now.
And so what would you tell people about getting into home services today? Too saturated or just harder than it was? Still doable?
I would say harder than it was. For a searcher's budget, I don't think that plumbing, HVAC, electric is going to be the right move. Maybe roofing. Water treatment's kind of interesting. I think you can back into plumbing, HVAC, and electric. But, it's hard to compete with PE with multiples. So I would personally not do it. But, I don't know.
Well, this just reinforces, if you really want to get into home services, plumbing, HVAC, this just reinforces your earlier point of buying small. It's the only way you could get in because a PE company is not going to buy a $500,000 revenue business or FTE business, let alone revenue business.
There was I talked to a company the other day and they were doing like $2 million in plumbing and they had 800 Google reviews. That's outrageous. That's amazing. So like you can play the game, like you can get there. It's just you have a harder time than you did 5 years ago. That's not saying it's not worth doing. I do think it would be very difficult today to pay 10 times on a $15-20 million business and then have to compete against somebody that knows what they're doing in this industry. So I think that would be a tough game. Like you have a lot less of a ramp to figure stuff out. But roofing, I think there's tangential, and I like the idea of buying something and backing into an industry. Big fan of that. Cheaper multiples, and you can get a little bit more creative. So if you want to get into plumbing, then buy a septic pumping company that's going to trade at hardly anything, add drains, then you add plumbing. Or go buy a duct cleaning company that you can buy for like 1.5 times earnings, add HVAC. Go buy a chimney sweep company, add HVAC. So like you can end up there, you just have to be ready to build. But like buying a straight plumbing HVAC electric company right now, probably not a great idea.
Okay, John, now that you're starting to talk about different verticals within home services broadly, let's close out with this great Twitter thread that you did, which was really like a primer on home services. And so it's long, maybe we won't get to all of it, but I'm going to walk you through a piece or two of it. You start out by talking about the kind of 4 tiers of home services businesses.
Yeah.
And so I'll kind of give you bullet points and then you fill it in for us.
Yep.
So the 4 tiers, the first one was what you called the white collar of blue collar. Big TAMs, licensed moat because it requires licensing. And those are the ones you just that you've been referring to, HVAC, plumbing, electricians. What did you mean by that? And by tier 1, does that mean the best or what?
So when you're thinking about home service or service companies in general, there's a bunch of differentiators. I think we're probably going to talk about all of them, but staffing is one of the biggest ones. Like who is the type of person that you're about to work with? Blue collar, I don't ever really use the word blue collar except for if I'm talking to someone on Twitter. Like it's not like this is, I don't know, they're just people. But like as someone that's going to climb up on a roof in 100-degree weather in Texas is probably not having a lot of great options in their life. You see a lot of ex-cons, a lot of drug addicts, a lot of alcohol addictions, and a variety of other problems. And that's sort of one end of the labor spectrum, is like fresh out of prison, he doesn't have an option. So he's going to do your roof work. The other side is a highly experienced 20-year craftsman that is paid multiple 6 figures. And that is where you find plumbing, HVAC, and electric. So these are 2, very different people, very different skill sets, very different backgrounds, and very different perspectives. So I think people come into these businesses and they're like, blue collar. And it's like, not at all. These are completely different ends of the labor pool, and you have to decide which one you want to work with. So that was the point that I was trying to make with the white collar, blue collar, is this isn't some guy who's, fresh out of prison. I mean, maybe for some companies, but this is likely a highly experienced, very highly compensated craftsman.
And so is another way of thinking about that basically the spectrum of skill from unskilled to skilled?
Spectrum of skill. How big is the labor pool? Like, it's probably not very complicated to find ex-cons that need a job. So you can find more people, but your turnover is going to be high. You're going to deal with a lot of stuff. And I think that was the other side, is who do you want to work with? Most people that I know that have run a roofing company have had a gun or knife pulled on them at some point by their own employees. I actually can't think of anyone that's never had that happen. So, and yeah, I really can't. I can think of like 10 or 12 roofing company owners. Like, that's,
and they've all had a knife or gun pulled on them by an employee.
Yes, physically threatened with a weapon. Yes. So
Wow.
that is one end of the labor pool. And personally, that's not really an end of the labor pool that I want to deal with. Like, I'm good. I'm all set. What, what I do like doing is I like working with smart people that care about their craft. But the downside of that is it is very hard to find them. And the labor market's tight and compensation is ridiculous. So it's just much more competitive. So that was the difference I was attempting to make. So that's one of the things that sets these tiers apart is like, who are you going to be working with? How much is your turnover going to be? What's recruitment look like? Will you be physically threatened with a weapon? You know, that stuff matters when you're thinking about buying a business.
Well, another thing that matters, which brings us to tier 2, is the TAM, the size of the market opportunity. So tier 2 you have is low TAM, as opposed to tier 1 was high TAM.
Yep.
Low TAM, no license, and some service/install. And so your examples here were pool service, garage door, damage remediation. So elaborate there.
TAM is total addressable market. How many people are willing to pay you money? For example, in Chicago and in Phoenix, those are currently the only 2 cities that have this. But in each of those cities, there is a $250 million or higher plumbing, HVAC, and electric home service business. That's huge. That's like obviously a very large business. So every house has heat. Every house, needs hot water. Everybody needs AC, and everyone needs power. And you need those visits frequently. So 2 visits a year from HVAC, 1 every 2 years for electric, and 1 a year for plumbing. That's like average. And garage doors, obviously Tommy Mello has built a really big company, but how many times do you have your garage door guy out? Probably not many. The market's just smaller. Like, you have less need for that service. Damage remediation, like, that's a big addressable market. So I'm not sure what I was thinking with that exact one. And then what was the other one?
Well, pool service.
Pool. Yeah. Again, yeah. That's a small TAM. Who has a pool? And the ticket tends to be low with pools as well.
Yeah. Well,
So
and
just
pool
how
is
big-
regional, because in Phoenix, in Florida, you
In
can
Phoenix,
have, in Texas, you can have a big pool
So
business.
my point here is, when you're thinking about a business, what's the biggest it can get? Like, how big can you take it? And if there's not an example in one market, like Tommy Mello is not in one market, 200 million, and they have like 100 some locations. Precision and all these other garage door companies, they're big. So, like, as I say this, someone's going to be like, no, there's $1 billion garage door company. I bet. And I bet they also have like 1,000 or 2,000 locations. Mm-hmm. How big can you get in one market? Mm-hmm. So that's how I see the opportunity.
Well, and the other thing that was a difference between tier 1 and tier 2 was licensed versus unlicensed. Anything more to say on that? Is that just go back to the kind of how
I think
hard it
that's
is to
just
find
a general
people?
moat. Yep, general moat, labor, and also what you're able to pay. Like, it is, there will always be a neighbor kid down the road that will mow your lawn for $20, and probably until the end of time. That kid will always exist because it doesn't take any licensure to do that. So you have to distinguish yourself in different ways. Whereas with licenses, that sets a bar for the total number of competitors that you can have. So it's a moat as far as who can compete.
Great. Tier 3, you have described as kind of all service, no install, always small, tough labor. So here is the lawn cutting. Here is window washing, power washing.
Yep.
So talk to us a little bit about when you say all service, no install. What are you getting at there?
Yeah. And I'm going to start with, this is a personal preference. So my personal preference of a business that I like to run is a business that has a service and install component. I think that allows for a smoother path to growth. And the reason I like that is 2 different things. Leads are cheaper. So if all I was ever doing was replacing HVAC equipment or water heaters, my cost per lead would be high. a lot higher. And I would have big peaks and valleys depending on demand for that service. Service install allows you to get leads significantly cheaper, like 10 to 20 times cheaper, as well as create a new profit center and feed the install departments. So that is my personal preference, is I like that. I think that that is a sustainable way to scale a business, is you have a low cost feeder into a value ladder where eventually you get the big ticket.
Low cost feeder into a value ladder for the uninitiated. What do you mean? Give us more on those phrases.
HVAC is the best example. Second best is drain cleaning. But so HVAC, hey, we're going to do a $98 tune-up. That's the low cost feeder. So we're going to come in, we're going to do this tune-up twice a year on your home for $98. When we're there, we're going to offer you options. So now we're inside the value ladder of things that add incremental value to us as well as to the homeowner. And the bottom of that ladder is, or the top of that ladder, however you want to look at it, is the system replacement itself, the large ticket. So we get in there for $98. Let's say our conversion rate is 60% into something higher. So maybe that's an air scrubber or a humidifier or filter change or something small. So instead of $98, maybe the average ticket is $1,000. And 1 in 5 becomes a piece of equipment. Mm-hmm. So, which is, $9,000 average ticket or $10,000 average ticket. So it starts off at $98, could become $1,000, and 1 in 5 becomes 10. Mm-hmm. So that's the value ladder. So I like that style of business. I think it's sustainable. I think it reduces peaks and valleys. And if you look at the growth of our business over the last 2 years, 3 years, it roughly agrees. So despite HVAC being very known as seasonal, my growth literally looks like this. It's ridiculous, regardless of season. I think I posted a picture of it on Twitter because people don't believe me. And it's that service always feeding install that makes that possible, because we will always have fresh leads even when the weather's not conducive to what we're trying to do.
And so just to be clear, when you say install, you mean the install is the big ticket,
yes,
tickets.
Right.
Install is a new system, basically.
Right.
Okay. Yeah.
So,
or replacement.
So I like businesses that have both. I think that is a sustainable way to grow a massive business. And when I see businesses that have both, I get really pumped up because I'm like, that can be huge as long as the TAM is big enough. Like, are there enough people to serve that to? Garage doors is a great example. They have a value ladder, the same as plumbing HVAC. I just think there's a smaller market for garage doors. Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's the type of business I like. So the next two tiers 3 and 4, are either side of that spectrum. So one is all service. So that means, that $98 thing, that's all they get. There's no value ladder. Or maybe the value ladder only gets you down to like $500 with upsales. So that's, power washing. Like, hey, well, instead of just power washing your driveway for $200, we'll power wash the house for an extra $1,000, something like that. Obviously that's good. It's just not $10,000. So you just can't grow it that big. And on top of that, the TAM is small. Like, how many people are going to do power washing? I don't know. But I know that I've never done power washing, and I live in a nice house. So I assume most people are like that. I really don't know. So window washing is another one. It's all tickets, right? Like, yeah, maybe you get a big contract or whatever. So there's no big bottom of the ladder where you can build up to something large and you can upsell your way and prove enough value and do all that. So there's like no end, which I don't like. I like the journey. I like the customer journey. I think that's cool and fun, and I think we get to provide really good value to customers. So that's all service. All install is the opposite. Hey, so it's lumpy, and that's what I don't like about that. Is I want to build a big sustainable business that self feeds. Like the business should be a flywheel. I like this idea that marketing feeds call center feeds service feeds sales feeds install, and install feeds accounting, And most of my job is just keeping that flywheel going. Let's get more leads. Let's serve those leads. Let's hire more techs. Let's sell more stuff. Let's install more stuff. Let's pay our bills. On and on. And I think that's sustainable. And it's a very step-by-step way to grow. I think that install only is tougher. It's project-based.
Give us examples of install only.
Foundation repair, roofing, right?
Foundation
Massive
repair.
tickets, right?
Remodeling, contractor,
right.
GC
20,
work.
30, 40, 50 grand average ticket, ridiculous average tickets. But if you have no leads, you got nothing. That's just it. You're starving and you got to go hunt down leads. So I just don't like the inconsistency. I think that is a difficult way to grow a business. Yes, the ticket size is huge, but it's not consistent and it doesn't feed itself continually. And the flywheel is more like market, sell, market, sell. It's not, you can't machine it. In plumbing, HVAC, and electric, you can sell a membership and then that person gets 4 visits a year. So every day we sell more memberships. So every day our flywheel gets bigger. Every month I can bring on a new person to run those new memberships because we brought on 200 or 400 memberships a month. So every month our flywheel is just getting larger and larger because we're continuing to compound our efforts. And that's what I like about that style of business is your efforts actually compound. You get recurring customers, you get contracted customers that you can get into a value ladder to achieve the big ticket. And either service or install doesn't have that component. So if you want to scale up an install project only business, you're spending more money on ads. You don't really have recurring customers. You replace a roof once every 20 or 30 years. You're not going to do many foundation repairs. So that's what I don't like about that. It's feast or famine. And I don't think it's a sustainable way to get to 100 million.
Well, and that's an important criterion that you just said is you are coming at this from the perspective of getting really big because that's the league in which you play, or that's your next goal, 100 million.
Yeah.
So a lot of the people listening here would be happy
Yes.
be happy growing into a $15 million business. And you probably could have these other tiers, maybe not a garage door business, but a foundation repair business, you could get to 50 million.
Yeah, I think so. If very biased, this is coming from my perspective, and I set out on this journey to build something meaningful and to build something big. So I've never looked at it from any other perspective other than that.
Yeah. So that would be the question for the audience, for the searcher to ask him or herself is how big a business do I want to build? Is it important to me to get to a 9-digit business, 9-figure business? Maybe not. So
maybe it should be though, listener. I'm just tossing that out there.
John, we're approaching 2 hours. I'm going to have to let you go. This has been rich as I thought it would be. An amazing story, an inspirational story, and then an education on the lay of the land and home services.
Sure.
So we could keep going for another hour, but it's late for you and me both.
Yeah.
What haven't I asked? What would you want to tell people, searchers, home services, anything? You have so much to share, but is there anything you want to leave the audience with?
I think the big thing, I don't know that I finished the, and it'll be quick, but why it's hard because you have no idea what you're getting yourself into. And the only way you'll know is by doing it. I'm sure I wouldn't have listened to someone that gave me the same warning. I'm sure that I would have said, I'll figure it out, which obviously I did. But one of my biggest learnings over the past decade of watching other business owners and other people attempt to become business owners is this is not meant for everyone. And what I obviously, I laugh and I joke about all the many mistakes that I've made. But I did get all the core stuff right. And I think that many people don't or are incapable. So I think the thing that I want to share is be cautious. I used to think that everyone could do this, and I now understand that they can't. Not everyone can do this. I suspect most people are either incapable or unwilling to make the sacrifices that are required to do this. It's painful. You learn a lot about yourself and about a lot of other things, but it's a difficult road. So if you're gonna do the leap,
John, what do you think? What do you think
an exit path.
The most unexpected hard bit is?
Man, pick a thing. I mean, you could pick almost anything. Have you ever hired and fired executives? Have you ever done mass layoffs? Have you ever shut down like 7-figure business units with teams attached to it? Have you ever burned down a house? Like pick a thing. How many times you've been stolen from? All right, turn that into every day. Like you're going to get stolen from every day by somebody. Yeah, it's endless. So like every day is a new punch in the face, and you gotta have some thick skin. And that's why I've started to. That's one of the other like why it's good to start smalls is you get your skin thick, sort of like graduate into it, or even just starting from nothing. Like I'm kind of pro franchising right now. I think that's good, and I think that gives people a lot of like direction. I don't know. I'm personally just tired of watching people go bankrupt because they had no idea what they were getting themselves into and also weren't capable of doing it. It's discouraging. I don't like it. I am sad for the people that it affects, and I've had to see a lot of people go bankrupt. So I don't like it.
These are searchers.
Yeah, friends, searchers. Yeah, it's real. It's real. Like I think Twitter only talks about the good stuff, and what I attempted to highlight in our talk today is I obviously did the core stuff right, but like there was a lot of things I did wrong, and any of those could have been really bad.
Okay, John. Well, it's really important for that to be communicated. We do try to highlight that it's not all rainbows all the time, for sure. And I
have
do
like
think
10 friends that went bankrupt in the last 12 months. Like it's ridiculous.
Really?
Yes. Yeah, it's crazy. Lost their house. Yeah. Like it's
You're
real.
kidding.
I really wish I was.
Is this because something is going on, or is this just
they weren't prepared? They didn't understand the business. They didn't understand the industry. They weren't the leader that they thought they were. They weren't as capable as they thought they were. Just because you're smart. Like, I don't think I'm that smart. But we've been able to do this. I think it's because I'm stubborn. But those are like, I don't think it takes a brilliant person to do this. I think it takes a lot of grit. And a lot of humility to approach things right. And it takes a lot of research into what you're actually about to do. And like more research than seems to happen. People get caught up in spreadsheets and not really like, oh, here's the people I'm going to work with. Like I might have a knife pulled on me if I buy a roofing company. Like that is a reality of buying a roofing company. Or
John, how much of the fact that you kind of grew up in the business and just kind of intuitively understood it wasn't foreign territory for you? Do you
I think that helped me leaps and bounds. And if you look at other people that also have large, like Brian Beers is a great example. Like if you look at Brian Beers and what he's done is incredible. Like he's done something absolutely amazing. He also grew up in a Midas franchise. His dad had a Midas franchise that he grew up in the same way that I grew up in the plumbing and HVAC business. So I'm not saying that it's impossible for someone else to follow Brian's footsteps, but Brian knew that business like the back of his hand before he was 18.
Yeah. And
that is a totally different thing than you, random person from Evergreen Capital, who's going to respect someone's legacy.
Yep.
Yep.
Can we go back to the part where you're growing $100 million business from
yes.
$1 million in revenue?
Yeah. But again, like it is possible. Like we're going to do it. 26 million this year. That's crazy. We just did 1.7, I think 5 in January, which is, wild. That was my entire revenue in my first full year of ownership. So you can build something big from something small.
All right, John. Well, where would you like people to go? Your podcast, your newsletters?
Yeah. If you want to hear more about what we're talking about, ownedandoperated.com. There's a newsletter, there's a podcast, and then you can find me on Twitter at Wilson Companies.
John Wilson, what a joy.
This was fun.
I'm glad I finally made this happen.
Yes.
This is a bit of a feather in my cap, just kind of personally for me. Your name was in lights for me for a long time, so it's really cool that I'm at the point where you'll come on my pod. So
I had a good time.
Great. Thank you, sir. I hope you enjoyed that interview. Make sure you subscribe to the Acquiring Minds channel below. We are now publishing twice a week, so tons of new interviews and stories to come. Stories that will help you along your own path to acquiring a business.